Clip 295, inverse functions. This is the first part. So, started off putting inverse means. Well, if you're doing equations, solving equations, you normally do the inverse to be able to find the answer. So that is called the opposite. So the inverse means opposite. Now, what does it link to? It links to solving equations. And one method to use in solving equations could be using function machines. So I found over time that this is the easiest way of doing inverse functions. So the types of notation you're going to get is f to the power minus 1 of x and g minus 1 of x. So you'd say f minus 1 of x. That's what that means. And these both mean find the inverse functions. Okay, so what we're going to do is do a function machine for the expression you're given, and then we're going to do an inverse function for it. So first one, given f of x is equal to 2x minus 5, find an expression for f to minus 1 of x. That means find the inverse function for this. Okay, so the first step is you're going to do a function machine that's forward. So if I take this expression and go, right, what do I do with x? I start with x, what do I do to it? I would times it by 2 because of 2 in front. And the second thing I'd do is I'd then take away 5. And then that would give me f of x. Now to do the function machine, you do this backwards. So second thing, you do the inverse function machine. So you start with x, and then you're going to go backwards. So what's the reverse? Well, reverse of minus 5 is plus 5. And then the reverse of times 2 would be divide by 2. And that gives you f minus 1x. In other words, the reverse. So you've just then got to put that into an expression. So I start with x, I add 5, and I divide by 2. Divide by 2, you put it over. That's the inverse function, f minus 1x. Okay, so 1, you would do a function machine. 2, you do the inverse function machine. And 3, you would write an expression for that function machine. Okay, there are your 3 steps to do. Okay, next one. Given f of x equals 7 bracket x plus 4, find an expression for f minus 1x. So you need the inverse function for this. So what do? Start with x. So number 1, do a function machine for this expression. Start with x, then I add 4, and then what do? I times the whole thing by 7. And that gives me f of x. So backwards, you're going to start with x. We're going to go, instead of times 7, you're going to do divide by 7. Instead of plus 4, you're going to do take away 4. And that would give you f minus 1x. So third step, you've got to do an expression for that, which is, what do? We'll start with x, and then divide by 7, and then I take away 4. So that's what the expression would be. Be careful, it's not x minus 4 all over 7, it's x over 7, then minus 4. Okay, next one. So notice the difficulty comes with these when you've got divides and where to put them. So times and divides and where to put them, to making sure you've got them in the right place. Okay, we've got f of x is x over 3 minus 7, separate. Find an expression for f minus 1 of x. So first step, draw a function machine out. Start with x. What we're going to do, divide by 3. Then I'm going to minus 7. and that will give me f of x. Second step, doing it in reverse or inverse. I start with x. I'm going to add 7 this time. Then I'm going to times by 3, and that would give me my inverse function. So algebraically, that will be written as take x, add 7, and times by 3. How are you going to times x plus 7 by 3? Well, you can either do 3x plus 21, or you can do 3, put a 3 in front. So it'll be 3 bracket x plus 7, or 3x plus 21. They're both acceptable as the inverse function. Okay, last 2 questions. So, fourth one. Given f of x is the square root of 2x minus 3 over 5, find an expression for f of minus 1x. So part 1, draw the function machine out going forwards. X times 2, then take away 3. Then we've got to square root that. And then we're going to divide by 5. And that gives f of x. Okay, so there's quite a few steps in there. Just be careful when you're going backwards now. So 2 for the inverse. Start with x. Then what we're going to do, well, that's divide by 5. So we're going to times by 5. Then we're going to square root. Opposite is squared. Then we're going to take away 3. Opposite is add. And then we're going to times by 2. Inverse is divide by 2. And that gives us the inverse function. So let's write it out. Start with x. Then I'm going to times by 5. So 5x. Then I've got to square that. So 5x all squared. And I've got to add 3. So 3 goes on the side. And then divide by 2. That will be my function. That's quite a difficult question, but if you follow the steps, the 3 steps I ask you to do by doing the function machine, it's not difficult in my opinion. Right, number 5. F of x equals 3x cubed plus 5. Find an expression for f minus 1x. So same thing again. First step, start with x. What we're going to do, well, we're going to cube it. Then what we're going to do, times by 3. And then we've got to add 5 on the end. And that gives us f of x. So, inverse, we start with x. What we're going to do, take 5, divide by 3. Cube root is the opposite of cubing. And that gives us f minus 1 of x. So, let's write it out. Start with x, take away 5, divide by 3, and then cube root the whole thing. Okay? That is my inverse function for that expression. Another place you might see this is changing the subject of a formula, because that's exactly what you do. You do the opposite things. So let's say we had y equals 2x plus 3. What do you do? Well, you take away 3 first, so y minus 3 is 2x, and then you divide by 2. Y minus 3 over 2 equals x. So that's the type of thing that you might get. Okay?